Welcome to the City of Oklahoma City Board of Adjustment meeting for May 5th, 2022. The agenda documents and minutes are located at okc.primegov.com/public/portal. For anyone wishing to speak today, you've hopefully previously notified staff. If you're the applicant, you'll be acknowledged to speak at the appropriate time. If you're not the applicant, hopefully you've filled out one of the white forms that's available outside, and we'll call on you at the appropriate time. We'll call the case, and then I'll recognize the applicant or the applicant's representative to speak. Then I'll recognize any supporters and then any protests, and then we'll close with the applicant speaking. Public comment will then be closed unless specifically reopened by me or another board member, and then the board will vote. For speakers other than the applicant, please limit your comments to 3 minutes. If several people have the same or similar comments, try to designate one speaker to represent the group, and then we'll acknowledge individual speakers that have individual information after the designated speaker speaks. Board members will be allowed to ask questions and make comments at any time during the meeting. Please do not interrupt board members because we need a clear record and it makes the meetings go by much faster. Before you begin with your comments, please identify yourself by stating your name and your address, and I call this meeting to order. First item on the agenda is to receive the minutes from the April 21st, 2022 meeting. I have one change to the minutes, which is item number 9. We approved a special exception in that case, but for a period of 1 year instead of 3 years. And so I don't know if anyone else had any other changes or anything to say about that, but I went back and watched the record of that and we approved 1 year, so I would change item number 9. Is there any other changes or a motion?
I'll move approval with the chairman's change on item number 9.
I'll second it.
And a motion and a second to receive the minutes as amended to the April 21st, 2022 meeting. Once you're able to, cast your votes. And those minutes are received. Next item on the agenda is continuance requests or withdrawals. Do we have any today? Oh.
We have none.
Okay. Was anyone that has a matter out there? We have no current continuance or withdrawals. So was anyone out there hoping to continue any items today? Okay. Hearing none, we'll move to the consent docket. No items on the consent docket. We'll move to items requiring a separate vote.
Okay, first item for public hearing is item 1, case 15037. It's a request of Richard and Davina Yarber for a variance to the AE1 Airport Environ Zone regulations at 10601 Southeast 89th Street.
Is the applicant present? Okay. If you wanted to come present your application for us.
Okay.
Yeah, if you just start with your name and your address and then just give us a summary.
Richard C. Yarber Jr., 10790 East Lindsay Street, Norman, Oklahoma.
Okay.
73026.
And then if you just give us a quick summary of your application.
Okay. I bought, with COVID and everything going on, I bought a piece of land up here southeast of Stanley Draper Lake at 10601 Southeast 89th Street. We purchased it. It's 3.34 acres. We purchased it in August. Did a little bit of clearing some trees, and by the time our builder got our blueprints ready for us, they filed for a permit to get it rejected, saying that we needed to file for a variance because we were in an AE1 and an APZ2 area. And I brought maps with me showing that I've moved my house, the plans to move my house back as far as I can, and it gets it right on this red line that the FFA sent me. And I was told I needed an FAA research. Well, I turned in all the paperwork, and 2 days later they got back with me, asked me some questions, and I answered them on the phone. And he said I was not required to have an FAA evaluation because it was just a residential home. He said you had to, in the area I'm at, would have to be 200 foot tall to need a FAA approval. So basically, I've brought some maps showing, everything I sent to y'all, basically, except the stuff I had to get for the FAA and then didn't need it. It actually is a little better explanation of where my house is gonna sit to this imaginary line that the Tinker Air Force Base
Okay.
furnished me.
I mean, I guess, did someone represent to you that you could build a house on this? I know you talked.
Richardson Home is a real good friend of mine, and I'm gonna be my own superintendent. I'm building it myself through Richardson Homes.
But when you bought the land, did someone represent to you that you could build a home on it or something? You talk about a lawsuit in here if this doesn't get approved, and so I will assume that's because someone represented to you that
Yeah,
it was
well,
zoned
the,
residential or something that's not.
when we found the land, you know, there was no reason to even think that I would have to have any kind of a variance, because there's 16 houses in this same addition, but they're all up, the front of the additions are on my acreage is the back position of these lots. That's why I've got southeast 89th frontage. All the rest of the acreages have a frontage called Hillview Road, which goes at an angle, but basically we're 2.5 miles southeast of Tinkerfield. And it puts us in a high noise zone. And Stephen Rhodes from Tinkerfield sent me some paperwork on what the house would need to be built as, 5 decibels lower than a standard 30 decibel noise level. It needs to be built to a 25. And mine actually is going to be more like about 18 decibels because it's full spray foam insulation, brick from ground to eaves. There's no wood siding on the house whatsoever. And that's to deadenate the noise.
Do you know? I'm going to ask a couple of questions here, but
Okay.
I'll get back with you in just a second. And then board members, if you have any questions, feel free. Okay. I think, Cindy, there's another sort of plat overlay that we can show, the one that's always in the applications, or I guess the site.
The zoning map.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, that's got the yellow lines, which ours does not. Okay, so my question was, sort of your piece of property compared to the other properties there?
Yes, sir.
And you're right, there are a lot of other residential properties around you. And so I was curious as to why that is, if they all received a variance, or they were there before it was zoned AE1, and it looks like they were pre-existing, and they were there before it was AE1.
There's a few of them that are newer, but they're out of this little zone thing right here, this red line.
Yeah.
They're out of it.
Okay.
So and I'd actually moved my house from that plot plan you showed. I found out that I only had 5-foot easement lines instead of 25 foot. So I've moved my house another 10 foot to the east and about 100 foot back, but and it actually puts the garage part of the house right on this red line.
Okay.
And there's ponds and terrain on the other side where I can't move it back any further to get completely out of that line. But I've got it awful close to it.
Okay.
Stephen Rhodes from Tinker Air Force Base sent, and y'all got the email, that he didn't have he didn't think one house would be a problem. He said, now, if you were going to build an apartment complex or something, we definitely wouldn't want that to happen. But
Well, this is traditionally a zoning application for something like this.
yes,
And so I've sort of pumped the brakes a lot for this board because this starts getting into zoning. And I'm concerned about whether we're going to see more applications from some of these adjacent properties.
they're sold. those no properties available in there. I'm at everybody else's, the front of my property is the back of all those other land. There's no land for sale there.
Yeah. Well,
So there won't really be, and I don't know why this lot happened to come up for sale.
yeah,
It was one of those things that, I was trying to find something on blacktop frontage and found it, and
yeah,
the ad that I found, the ad on it starts out, country living at its finest, one of the best locations in Oklahoma City. And that was by Keller Williams Realty.
Yeah.
And why would I have even thought to
Yeah.
double check anything
yeah.
The
with that?
sound of freedom.
Yeah.
I mean, and I brought the ad with, actually, I sent y'all one too, y'all got it.
Yeah. No, I saw it.
So,
So my initial reaction was sort of, first of all, getting my hands around why there's other residential in the area, and two, whether you need to go to planning commission and city council, because the last thing I want to do is have at least this board start rezoning things and telling people they can put residential houses where you're not supposed to put residential houses. But this does seem like it might fit the criteria for a variance. I'm sure the city probably told you to come here first because it's faster and it's a little bit more streamlined. Since all these other properties seem to have been grandfathered in, I don't know that this one would be that much different from those. And I don't know that we'd have that much of an issue with the rest of this area developing as residential. I don't know, but those are my initial thoughts. Board members, any questions or comments?
Just curious, what's the difference between AE1 and 2? Is it a density thing
did you say an AE1 and a 2?
or AE2? Yeah.
It's like 5.5 decibels difference.
Oh, yeah.
I've got this right here. It tells all the decibels where we're at. Would you like to see this? Y'all didn't have it. It's not on y'all stuff. This is what I had to get for the FAA.
I think he probably means just in the code, what the code says about AE1 versus
Yeah.
AE2. Yeah.
AE1 is going to be the one that's closer in to the airport or to Tinker.
Okay.
And it has use restrictions,
All right.
like no residential, no churches, no schools. And it carries a requirement to build any buildings to a certain noise attenuation standard.
Okay.
AE2 has no use restrictions, but it has the same building restrictions.
So the houses were built prior to the zoning, not prior to the base, right?
Prior to AE1,
Right, being a zoning code.
Right.
Yeah, before it wasn't in it. Okay.
That's, I think, what might
I
save
think
it.
out there, yeah.
I mean, the other issue is presumably council knew that this was there, and then they zoned it AE2, or AE1 for a reason, so that there wouldn't be any more residential there. I don't know, but questions, comments?
The one I can think of, I know it's 74th and Post, maybe, is a large,
That big
large
mansion?
house. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a friend of
It's
mine.
in the AE zone, and that's the one I know of that was approved, but I believe that was planning commission.
Well,
I'm
and that
not
would make more
mistaken.
sense,
Yeah,
right? If
right.
planning wants to come in and say you can put residential there.
Right, and that's what I'm saying, it's kind of the same deal, but,
it's been done both ways.
yeah.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah. I mean, I guess if he went to planning, he'd have to just make it try to get it R1 or something?
It's already R1, isn't it?
Yes, sir, it
Yeah.
is R1.
You have to be.
It just has the overlay of the AE1.
Oh, yeah, is the other option. I think I can
I'm cool with it.
probably get on board with one of these
Yeah.
as being kind of peculiar. If I see another one, I don't know that I can do that, because then we start getting into planning commission territory, but I think probably one of these I could probably get on board with as being unique. I don't have anyone else signed up to speak on this. I think we had a couple of letters of support, I think, and the sound of freedom. When you hear an airplane, that's just the sound of freedom. I think we got that.
Can I make a comment?
Sure.
For 19 years, I lived at 4624 Southeast 116th. Them AWACS flew over my house every day, the same height they fly over my land right now. So I'm used to the noise. The
Yeah,
noise don't
yeah.
bother me.
Well,
But
and-
I couldn't believe it. I moved, that far away, and they're still.
Yeah,
right
they're
over me, but,
following you around?
You know, I'm good with that.
Yeah.
And, you know, we've got the parameters to what we need to build the house at.
Yeah.
And what I sent it to y'all also. The letter from Stephen Rhodes gave all the parameters of the decibels that it should be and the building codes. And we're exceeding the
Yeah.
25 decibel noise.
I'm not concerned with the merits of the application at all. I'm just a little, our board only has so much authority. Each board or commission for the city has different authorities. And so I want to make sure that you're in front of the right board and we're not exceeding our authority and you shouldn't be in front of a different board. That's all. That's my only concern.
Yes.
It's not on the merits. If I were on planning commission, I'd probably approve it. But I think, again, this is probably going to be a one-off, hopefully, and I can kind of support it right now. But I'm only one board member, so,
It should be. There's not a whole lot available, and Tinker's gobbled up the rest of it.
okay. Okay. That sounds sort of like a motion.
We've got a lot of money in this lot.
I'll make a motion to approve case number 15038 for the reasons that it meets the requirements for variance.
I'll second it.
Got a motion and a second to approve the variance request in case 15037 for the reason that it meets the statutory conditions for a variance. Once you're able to, cast your votes. And it's approved.
Thank y'all so much.
Thank you.
Anything else?
I think that's it.
Thank you.
Thank
Now
you.
I guess I gotta go back through the permitting.
Yeah, you'll get this approval in 10 days. There's an appeal window of 10 days, and once that expires, you'll get this approval, and you'll be able to go on down the road from there.
Okay, thank y'all very much. Y'all have a great day.
Thank you. You too.
Item 2 is case 15308. It's a request of Benjamin and Crystal Martin for a variance to accessory building regulations at 15217 Southeast 57th Street.
Good afternoon, Board. I'm Benjamin Martin. I'm a homeowner. I live at 15217 Southeast 57th Street, Choctaw, Oklahoma, 73020. I attempted to present our case succinctly as possible in our original application to the Board, essentially requesting a variance from offset of an accessory structure being behind the furthest rear wall of our home. Without this variance, we would be creating a possible flooding and water drainage issue for us and our neighbors. That is the undue hardship that we're claiming. Since submission of our request and on their own volition after receiving the mail-outs that go to all of our neighbors, our adjacent neighbors sent you correspondence, I believe, supporting it. Additionally, since the time that we submitted to you, our HOA has approved this building per your approval for a variance, and the way I perceive the code is that it's based upon the need for aesthetic and safety and accessibility purposes, and we aren't going to have any issue with any of those, particularly with our HOA, because they're really concerned with aesthetics. Anyway, so I find those things pertinent, and those things were not on our application because they've happened since then. And then I can go through our application, but like I said, I tried to present succinctly when I wrote it down why we're wanting a variance in that. So I leave it to you to ask me whatever questions you. And I can go through our application if you want.
And this one will still be behind the front wall quite a bit, won't it?
Yes.
Okay.
Our house is, the way that our lot is structured, besides the topography, just our house in general is very deep. So the accessory building is going to be behind, 41 feet behind the front of our home and behind the garage entrances to our house. So, I mean, from the street level, especially since, as I mentioned, the topography is climbing as we go up, it's going to appear to be offset behind. So if aesthetics are the purpose of the code, which I can only speculate on all the purposes of the code, but then that is not going to be an issue. Any further back, and we have to start worrying about affecting our neighbors in an area where we have constant water drainage issues.
And
They
then,
want this where I want it. So that-
right, yeah. And then how far in front of that rear line are you?
How far in front, be the rear of the building or the front?
I guess the front.
So the front of the accessory building would be about, I'm ballparking be about 20, no, about 30 feet from the rear. So 41 feet from the front and about 30 feet from the farthest back wall.
Okay.
Also noting that our farthest back wall is hidden from street view because our house makes a kind of a nook and then comes back out, if
Okay.
that makes sense.
Yeah.
And I think it should be on the plot plan that you're looking at.
Board members, any questions or comments? Well, have anyone signed up to speak? Was anyone else hoping to speak on this application? Okay. Seeing none. Yeah, I mean, I think you have a kind of peculiar property, and the fact that this is, I start getting a lot more scrutiny whenever people try to build it right up to the front of the house or something. But this one's back quite a bit, so I think that helps your application. But questions, comments, or emotion?
I'll move approval of case number 15038 for the reasons that it meets the statutory conditions for the variance requested.
I'll second it.
Got a motion and a second to approve the variance request in case 15038 for the reason it meets the statutory conditions for a variance. Once you're able to, cast your votes. And it's approved.
All right, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Y'all have a great day.
Two.
Item 3 is case 15039, request of Addison Brown for a variance to the setback regulations in the R1 district at 801 Northwest 49th Street.
Blair Sutter here for the applicant, Mr. Addison Brown, and Mr. Addison Brown is in attendance if you have any questions for him. As you said, this relates to the property at 801 Northwest 49th. The property is currently a vacant lot. An applicant is seeking to build a home on that lot, of which he will be the owner and the occupant of. We are seeking a modest reduction of the 15-foot corner side yard setback. We seek a reduction to 9 feet. We believe we're entitled to this because the historical development of this neighborhood developed prior to the setbacks in this that are applicable in this area. And so you have, if you look at the Oklahoma City map, I have also some aerials if you would like to view those. But if you look at the corner lots on the Oklahoma City map provided with our application, you'll see that almost every instance the 15-foot corner side yard is not adhered to, and in those cases that it is adhered to, the corresponding 5-yard setback on the other side of the property is not adhered to. So what is especially unique is when this the structure on this lot was bulldozed, that property, it was set all the way on the west property line. And so in order to get in compliance with that setback, we had to move our plans over 5 feet. That provides a little bit more buffer on the west side of the home, but it also, at the same time, it takes away buildable area on the east side of the property, which gets into that 15-foot side yard. And so the history of this area, as I said, this 15-foot side yard setback isn't adhered to, but this board also approved a similar application at 4321 North Chartel. Here we are, compared to that application, I believe we are a smaller home. This home was specifically designed to maximize or fit this lot. You'll see that the building plan is what I'll call a shotgun or a galley style home. Because of it's a rectangle lot, it was designed in this way to help with that side yard in this requirement. So I would say we're trying to minimize the effect that we'll have on that setback. Also, you'll see that there's in addition to the setback that will remain, the 9 feet, there is significant right-of-way between the setback and also the curb. So I think when, obviously, the setbacks on corner lots, they make for a more pleasing intersection, but you're also concerned about safety. Here, safety should not be an issue because, one, we're adhering to the front yard side back, so visually, this will not impair the vision, you know, if someone's turning on that corner, but also there will still be a significant buffer from the street in that case. So with all that said, we would say, if you look at the neighborhood, how it developed and the uniqueness of this lot, we would request a modest reduction to 9 feet.
Do you have that overlay you were talking about with
Yes.
the neighboring properties that also either encroach or aren't subject to that 15-foot setback?
I believe it is this, yes. And so if you'll look right there, if you'll just go east, you'll see that property east of Northwest 49th, that is all the way over, as appears the boundary there. So the 15-foot setback isn't being adhered to there. You also go catty corner, you can see that. But I'd also just suggest, look at any intersection in this area, and you'll see that the 15 feet, it's hard to find someone complying with it. And even when they do comply with it, it's likely that they're not complying with the setback on the other side of the property. So here we're trying to hit the middle, comply with the west setback as we can, and then also a slight reduction in the east.
I'll sort of voice my concern here. Everyone in this area is sort of trying to overbuild, and so that's kind of my concern.
Yeah, that is, I can see why that's a concern. This is a hot area. Here, this is we meet the permeability requirements, so if you think if someone's trying to overbuild, that would also be an issue. Here, we meet those, there's not an issue with that, but it is also, the building plans, as we represent you today, it's about 2,700 square feet, and so that fits within the usual character of this neighborhood. It's brick construction with stucco features, and so we're trying to maintain the same character of the surrounding community, and we're certainly not trying to put a McMansion on the lot, because that wouldn't fit within. And this is also a property that the occupant will be, or the applicant will be occupying. So this is their home. They certainly aren't trying to fit as much square footage onto the property as possible and sell it. So.
Do you know the square footage of the prior building that was, or home that was demolished?
I don't know that. I do believe it was less than probably the 2,700 square foot, but I don't know that off the top of my head.
I've tried to look it up, but not having success on the county's website. But anyway, those are my concerns. Folks getting a variance and then just building a larger house as a result of the variance. So it's a pretty modest request, I think. It's not anything, I think it's 6 feet total that you're asking for, so it's not anything too excessive, but that's my concern is this area in particular, everyone's cramming as big a house as they can and coming to us or planning to make it bigger if they want to, so sort of have a little bit of caution in this area is all.
Yeah, and maybe it makes the applicant look a little bit better since he purchased it as a vacant lot. He's not the one who went in, bulldozed the former home. He purchased it as an empty lot, and now he'd like to build upon it. And so I could see if we somehow bought the property, bulldozed it, and are now asking for that would maybe look worse. But
Yeah.
In light of that, I think we look maybe a little better on that issue.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. Board members, questions or comments? I could see shaving it down a little bit, or something else, whatever the board wants to do, but.
I don't have a problem with it.
Okay.
It's pretty minimal.
And it sounds like you guys have tried to work around different situations to minimize this as much as possible, which we appreciate. And that is one of the statutory requirements. So it sounds to me like you've thought of other workarounds, and this is kind of the least that you can do, correct?
Yeah, credit goes to probably the architect and the applicant on that, but that is something I do think because these lots are a little bit narrower than other lots in the city, they try to maximize and put something on the space that would look nice.
For me, the sort of thing that might save it is the surrounding encroaching properties. I was working with Mr. Chambliss here, and we found a lot that encroached on any kind of 15-foot setback, so that helps the application. But at the same time, the city council passes these things, and even if folks get grandfathered in, the city council passed it for a reason, and so we should respect that. But that I think sort of helps the application here, is that there do appear to be a lot of encroaching properties nearby. I don't have anyone else signed up to speak. Was anyone hoping to speak on this application other than the applicant? Okay. Questions, comments, or a motion?
I'll go ahead and move approval.
Yeah.
Got a motion and a second to approve the variance request in case 15039 for the reason it meets the statutory conditions for a variance. Once you're able to, cast your votes. And it's approved.
All right,
Thank
thank
you.
you. And if we may be excused.
Yes. Thank you.
Item 4 is case 15021. It's a request of Aaron Roush for a variance to the accessory building regulations at 7225 Manor Ridge Lane.
Afternoon. I'm Aaron Roush, live at 7225 Ridge Manor Lane. I apologize I was not able to be here for the last meeting. I had one of my brothers come to my place. I was out of town. What I got from him was that the main concern was how close it was, how it's going to be to the house, if that's correct. So what I did was I went ahead and moved it back 3 more feet and then 3 feet farther to the north as well. And like I said in my variance letter here, my backyard actually slopes uphill the farther west you go. So there's the gazebo right there by the arrow. Or I'm sorry. The gazebo is back there, you go, right there. It goes uphill pretty good right up there. And there's that little tree right there by the arrow, and that's where it starts to slope up. So either way, I'm going to have to put a stem wall in, which isn't a big deal. But the higher I go, the higher the stem wall has to be. And so it's going to be more expensive that way. So I didn't know if I needed to talk on all 3 of the points, or if it was just mainly how close it was to the building, since I wasn't here for the last one.
I think the board was okay with the size,
Okay.
because a lot of it is a covered patio that gets included in the square footage.
Okay.
And so I think we were okay with the size. I think we're probably okay with the roof pitch, but it was just that setback.
Okay.
And I'm trying to, I didn't see in the packet that we got a reflection of the changes, and so I'm on the fly trying to.
Oh, I'm sorry.
go through
I
the
have.
changes.
So that's the new one that I created with the changes. The other one, the old one had it 2 foot away from the house, to the west and to the north. I submitted it, so that's
Okay. Yeah.
that's the new one that I apologize if it was a pain to do. I'm not very computer literate.
Yeah. Well, and sometimes not everything gets to us, so that's fine. But so with 5 feet, does he still need a variance for the distance between the detached building and the main building? I don't see the code provision?
The requirement for the separation between the two buildings is 6 feet.
Okay,
He's behind the rear wall now.
saw that.
So basically, you're dealing with 1 foot too close to the main structure and the 25-foot side setback on the north and the roof pitch.
So side, we've got, at least in the application, the 25-foot side and rear that he needs a variance.
It's just the side.
Okay.
There.
Oh, I see your revised plan in our packet now, so.
Okay.
Yeah, so that did make it to us. Did you move it south at all to address the side yard setback?
Actually, I think he actually made it worse.
Yeah, yeah.
Dude, what was that? I'm sorry.
The side yard setback, I think he took it from 5 to 3, right?
Yes, because I
Moved
moved
away
it
from the house.
south of my house, yes.
So could it, I guess one of our concerns at the last meeting, could it come south more to give more side yard setback?
Oh, absolutely. I can put it even with the house if that's what you guys want. I mean, that's not, the only reason I moved it initially, it was 2 foot north of the house, was because my septic is right down there. Right where that arc is that has the 5 behind my house.
Yeah.
My septic's right over in there. So it would probably be, if I put it even with the corner of my house, it'd probably be 6, 7 foot from my septic.
So the southern edge of the accessory building even with your house, or that northern edge even with your house?
I could do the southern part of the building
Yeah,
even with the northern part of the house.
okay, yeah. So that would move it a couple feet, right?
And that would give me, so there's 48, I didn't mark that. Oh yeah, I did 48 foot. There's 48 foot in between, so that would leave me 8 foot essentially between the shop and the fence.
Okay. Still pretty big variance.
Is it a trampoline back there?
That's the gazebo, I think.
That's a
Oh.
gazebo. The other thing, that's an old picture. I don't know, that's not even there anymore.
Oh, that, okay. On
And
Google.
then my neighbor who lives
He's
2
got one.
houses to the south of me,
Just
he
one?
just built a shop and he put it 5 foot from his fence.
I see your adjacent neighbor with a new shop too. I don't know about 2 houses down.
Yeah, it's like I said, we moved here 2 years ago, and we moved from 5 acres, and I had a 50 by 60 shop. So I've had storage for 2 years.
Could you, Cindy, can you go back to that one we were just looking at? Can you kick it to the west by a foot?
Sure.
Okay,
Absolutely.
because then you don't need a variance from, what I'm working with you here is one of the elements we have to meet is that what you're asking us is the minimum necessary.
Okay.
And so if there's a way to get it to where we don't even have to approve a variance, that's what the route we're gonna go. And so that's why I'm kind of trying to work with you.
Sure, absolutely.
To see what the minimum is. So it sounds like what the board would decide then is a variance to the 25-foot side yard setback, the roof pitch, and the size, I think is what we're left with. And I think, at least in the last meeting, we were okay with the roof pitch and the size, which leads discussion about basically an 8-foot setback from the north property line is what is left for us to talk about. So, questions, comments?
It's a lot.
Yeah, the reason we're getting a little silent is because usually we deal with variances that are a foot or two. And so when you start getting kind of 20 feet and
Oh, okay. I understand.
we start pumping the brakes a little bit.
I mean, to me, that gets to the size. I mean, if they can reduce the size a little, then you're gonna reduce the amount of variance you need for the setback. I mean, I know you want a 40 by 40 building, but
Yeah, that's true.
I mean,
That's true.
that's
Let's-
a big variance.
the size comes down, you know, maybe we go a 15 or a 10-foot setback, and then he can do
Work with what you have, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
And see, like I said, I mean, I would put it on the other side of the house because then I would have more room, but then I have to make a new drive and everything else. This way I can utilize that drive.
I mean, I've said this before on these accessory buildings. I mean, to me, I have a hard time reaching the hardship, you know? I mean, truly. I know you want to have an accessory building and you want it to be this big, but, you know, again, if it's not the minimum that we can do to accommodate, I mean, the option is you don't have an accessory building. I mean,
Right. And it would be, I mean, it would be a regular 30 by 40, which would be within the size and everything normal. But like I said, I'm adding that office area for my wife because she works at home. And we have 4 kids, and that's not your guys' fault.
I personally, especially given the area that this is in, I mean, it's RA, so we're a little, we can work with them a little bit on that, and kind of the part of the city that it's in, I think we can work with them a little bit. I could do, you know, 10 or 15 foot setback on that north side.
I mean, I
And
think
then-
we have some peculiarity with the topography of the slope and all of that. I mean,
Yeah.
I can get there. It's just, I mean, again,
Oh,
can-
yeah. Whether it's a hardship to not be able to put in a pool, we get see that sometimes, you know, so, the point is taken. Any other questions or comments? I don't have anyone signed up to speak. Is there anyone else hoping to speak on this application? Okay. Hearing none, questions, comments, or a motion?
I mean, is the applicant okay with a variance of 15 feet? I mean, could you work with that, or I mean,
Good
or are
question.
we making a motion to deny the application as
Right.
requested?
Right, yeah.
Which I don't.
What you're saying is 15 foot from the fence?
Yeah, on the north side. So you'd push the whole thing south a little bit, and back a foot, right, to get it away from the house.
Right, back a foot. I mean, I can try to look at it, but like I said, my septic is right there, and because I would have to drop the size of the building down pretty good to get 15 foot away from it.
What about 10 instead
Yeah,
of
if we're
15?
granting a variance for 15, then that would mean 10 for him, right? I mean,
Oh, that's not what I meant. I meant 10 foot would be the setback.
got it.
So, I mean, I guess it depends on how you phrase the sentence, but
I know, I just
it'd
want
be
to
a
be sure
variance of
we're clear.
15. Yeah, so, well, maybe we're talking about the same thing. It'd be a variance of 15 feet or a setback of 10 feet.
Of 10
right?
feet,
I don't know which one you were talking about.
Got it.
I thought you were talking about a 15-foot setback, so it would
As long
push
as
it.
the applicant understands it would be 10 feet from the fence.
Okay, yeah. Yeah. So that sounds like it's more doable. Is that, do you think more doable? Because-
I can make something work, that's fine.
Yeah, because
Appreciate
to Mr. Ybarra's point, it would be, you know, I'm trying to sort of work with you, and then if we approve something and it doesn't work for you, it doesn't really matter that we approved it because you can't build it anyway, right? And so she wants to make sure that if we approve something, you can actually build something, right?
Can I have a second just to do some numbers real quick?
Sure, no problem.
I think that would put it, if I did this actual size, I think it would put it, it looks like 7 foot. I can make it work.
Okay,
I'll make it work.
with the 10-foot setback, okay.
So 10 foot setback and 1 foot west.
Yep,
I can make
based
that
on
work.
this current rendering, and then everything else seemed like the board didn't have a problem with, so, okay. Well, do we have a motion?
Make sure I get my numbers right. I move approval of case number 15021 for the reasons that it meets the statutory conditions for the variance the variance approved would be 15 feet.
A 15-foot variance to the 25-foot
15-foot
setback.
variance to the 25-foot setback.
Yep.
And as I understand it, we are approving the variance for the pitch and the size requirement as well, as requested in the application.
And then, Rita, for your purposes, do we need to deny any of the other?
You need to address everything that's
Okay, so we've got the distance between the accessory building and the main building. That one we would deny, because it doesn't meet the conditions.
yes.
Do we need a separate motion for that?
No, you can add that
Okay.
as part of it.
And I will include that in my motion.
Okay, and see if there's anything else. So, it talks about this rear yard setback. Do we need to address that?
No, it just
Okay.
happens to be in that same section.
Oh, okay.
Just took the whole paragraph.
Okay, that makes sense. Okay, are you satisfied with the motion, Rita?
Yes, I am.
Okay, do we have a second?
Yeah, I'll second that.
Got a motion and a second to approve the variance requests in case 15021 for the reason that they meet the statutory condition for variances for the following requests. A 15-foot variance to the 25-foot setback, the 410 roof pitch, the maximum square footage of the building, and then a motion includes the denial of the request for the distance, for variance between the distance of the detached accessory building and the main building. Once you're able to, cast your votes.
I cannot.
Presentation button.
Let me see. Oh, here it is. Got it.
Okay, and it's approved.
Awesome, thank you very much.
Thank you.
So just to clarify,
Yeah,
so I'm going 6 foot west of the house
correct,
and 10 foot south of the fence.
correct. Yep.
Awesome.
And I think everything else was okay.
Do I need to resubmit the map and do all that stuff again, or
I think,
just
well, I guess for your permit, but
Move on to permitting.
yeah, for our purposes.
permit side?
Yeah.
Okay,
And
I'll
then
do
like,
it then.
like that last application, it'll be 10 days because there's an appeal window in case
Understood.
anyone wants to appeal.
So I'll stand by to stand by.
Yep.
Got it.
All right.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Y'all
you.
Have a good day.
Two.
Item 5 is case 15034, special accession of Alyssa Dyer for lodging home sharing at 740 Northeast 36th Street.
Hello, I'm Alyssa Dyer. The address is 740 Northeast 36th.
Okay. Can you just give us a brief overview of this application?
Yeah, definitely. This is a duplex off 36th Street, so it's 1 bed, 1 bath on each side, kind of shotgun style. One side, the easternmost side, has long-term tenants in place. I'd like to use the west side as a short-term rental for Airbnb.
Do you expect to keep that other side as long-term rental?
Yeah, I hope to. My
Okay.
tenants are awesome, so I'm hoping
Okay.
they'll stay for a while.
Okay. And then, this one seemed a little bit unique from what we normally see in that it's just 1 bedroom, which I think is in favor of the application, just because I like some variety in these, so they're not all the same thing.
If
Worry
it
about
matters, the
parties.
appeal on, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Oh, no, I'm just, I don't have to worry about parties with the
Right.
house that size.
That's true.
The primary appeal is its proximity to OU Med, so traveling nurses or other professionals and,
And then I think you had the next application
yes,
also? Okay.
yeah.
We'll hear those separately. Any questions or comments from the board? Okay. I don't have anyone signed up to speak. Is anyone else hoping to speak on this application? Hearing none. I don't know that we needed any additional conditions.
And just need to agree on a term, I think.
Yeah, this one, there's, just looking at my map here, there's nothing around it, and it's a one-bedroom, so I could get on board with this one for a period of 3 years.
I was thinking 3.
Yeah, I don't normally, not the normal first one to propose that amount of time, but I think I can do that on this one. Questions, comments, or motion?
I'll move approval for a term of 3 years. Advertise your self-imposed rules, conditions, and I'll
Okay.
Second.
Got a motion and a second to approve the special exception in case 15034 for the reason it meets the statutory conditions for a special exception for a period of 3 years on the condition that it'll be advertised with the conditions stated in the application. Once you're able to, cast your votes. And it's approved.
Thanks, guys.
And item 6, 15035, is application by the same applicant for home sharing at 1615 North Land Avenue.
This one's almost identical. It's one bed duplex. Main difference is that it's bottom and top story. So long-term tenant upstairs, and then ideally short-term tenant downstairs.
What's the parking situation on this one?
So this one's a little unique. So there's actually 2 duplexes on this lot. I didn't think to include a picture of it. So it's a duplex and then a 4-car, I'll call it a garage, and then another duplex. So I own both of those, and there's long-term tenants in upstairs and downstairs of one of the duplexes, and then the other building is the one we're discussing. But there's 4 parking spaces essentially between.
And then this, renters for this property would have a designated place to park, or
Yeah.
would they?
Yeah, they do right now. For the most part, they don't actually use the garage to pull in unless it's, hailing or something. They just park immediately in front of it.
Okay. Might do a little shorter on this one personally, but just being in this area. But any other questions or comments from the board?
My concern is this is in an area that's pretty saturated already. I'm the grouchy one on the board, but
Yeah. Yeah, I think the one-bedroom thing makes me a little more comfortable with it. Especially there's, I guess, 3 other units near in that vicinity that have long-term tenants in it. If those start wanting to be converted into B&Bs, I think we'd have some serious discussions. But with just one of them being a B&B, I think that's consistent with the code. Personally, I'm only one board member, but I don't have anyone else signed up to speak. Was anyone else hoping to speak on this application? Okay. Hearing none. Questions, comments, or a motion?
I'm okay with this. My concern is the same. It's the concentration in the neighborhood. So I'm thinking 1 year. So,
I think that's probably wise because it sounds like we're getting some traction on city council and potentially modifying the home sharing ordinance to address some of these concerns, and that's hopefully going to happen within the next year. And so by the time that happens, we'll get some clarity, and with that, we can decide what to do with this application in a year. And if at that point, maybe get a longer special exception. But
I'll go ahead and make a motion to approve, term of 1 year, advertised rules, self-imposed limitations.
Okay.
Do we have a second? Sure announced. Got a motion and a second to approve the special exception in case 15035 for the reason it meets the statutory conditions for a special exception for a period of 1 year and including the self-imposed conditions as stated in the application. Once you're able to, cast your votes. And it's approved.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Item 7 is case 15040. It's a renewal of a special exception of Sharon Murphy to allow a mobile home to serve as a temporary second dwelling at 6201 North Murphy Lane.
Good evening, council members and staff. Thank you. I'm Romaine Murphy, or better known as Sharon Murphy, at 6201 North Murphy Lane, Oklahoma City, 73121.
It's not very often you get to live on the street with your name on it. That's kind of nice.
Actually, the 911 people came out and said, since you've got this street, we need to be able to find you. And at the time, only Murphys were living there, and I said, let's make it Murphy Lane. It's not a paved road, so that's what
awesome.
we did. I know a lot of people say, oh, you're joking, right? But no. But I'm here to ask for a continuation of my renewal, or a renewal for 3 years for a medical variance for my trailer. My nephew lives behind me, and my sister-in-law lives in front of me, and it makes it very convenient for me, and my house is set up for handicap purposes, and it just makes it better for me. Expense-wise and everything, I can't find anything that I could afford, you know, payment-wise or monthly rental that would even compare.
Yeah, it sounds convenient, and apparently you haven't upset too many people in the past few years because there's no protests or anything, and so, and you're also right on the city limits, so I take that into effect. I mean, if you're a mile or so over, you wouldn't need a special exception, so so that I take that into consideration as well, but the maximum we can do is 3 years. I assume you're asking for 3 years?
Please.
Okay. The only other thing I talk about in these applications is if you're looking for more than 3 years, you might consider another option for relief so that you don't have to keep coming back here. You'd probably have to get it rezoned to do that, or I guess you can maybe get a variance, I don't know, but something that would last longer and then you wouldn't need to keep coming back here. So just think about that in the future, but I always like to just
And
let
what are you
people know.
calling it?
I mean, would you get a,
Be an SPUD probably.
yeah, you could rezone it for $1,200, I guess. for the
Well, since
application.
it's going to eventually be my nephew's property, I probably won't do that, but,
Okay,
you know, I mean, I'd be happy to send the application and the money without having to show up. I don't mind that.
well, we like seeing you, so. Yeah, I just like to mention that, not that it is against your application or anything, I just like to mention that so that you don't have to keep coming back. If it's something you're going to foresee for the next 10 years or something,
Right.
you can think about something different than this route. Board members, any questions or comments? Okay. I don't have anyone signed up to speak. Was anyone hoping to speak on this application other than the applicant? Okay, seeing none, I think we can take a motion.
Move approval of case number 15040 for the reasons that it meets the statutory conditions for the special exception.
I'll second it.
Got a motion and a second to approve the special exception in case 15040 for the reason it meets statutory conditions for a special exception for a period of 3 years. Cast your vote, please. And it's approved.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I appreciate you.
Thank you.
Item number 8 is case 15036. It's a special exception.
Another Murphy? Okay, did you want to, ma'am, did you want to protest your sister-in-law? No, I'm just kidding. Thank you for coming.
Item 8, 15036, special exception to allow home sharing in the R4 district at 11327 North May Avenue, Unit F.
Did you say 15036?
Yes.
Okay, yes. Yes, my name is Stan Carver. My wife is Hannah Fine, and we are looking for a permit, an accommodation permit for a unit at 11327 North May Avenue, Unit F.
So how are you related to the applicant?
It's my wife.
Okay. And will you be managing the property?
I'm sorry?
Will you be managing the property with your wife?
No,
or-
no, we lived there for 3.5 years, and then we've recently bought a home, and I have a little interest in it. I'm on the board of the homeowners association at this complex.
Okay.
So there are others, homeowners who have received this sort of permits, and they've done quite well with it.
Okay.
Do you know how many other short-term rentals there are in this complex?
I'm
Do you know how many other short-term rentals are in this complex?
I don't know exactly. I can name 3 for certain, and there are others I have heard. I don't know succinctly, but yeah, I do know 3 that I could call their names. Actually, the president of the homeowners association board has a unit, and she's an attorney, a local attorney as well.
I guess maybe they got grandfathered in or something.
I know of at least 2, because I personally worked on them. And did the cabinets and trimming them, so.
Okay. I will let you in on what the board is concerned about with this, and it's with some of these multi-unit properties, if we start getting too many of those as home sharing, they end up just being hotels. And so, I mean, effectively hotels. And so, you know, we proceed with caution in those, and we've denied applications in the past where they've wanted to have the entire property used for home sharing. That's not what you're doing here, but I think that's the concern of some of the board members, is we don't want to get anywhere close to that problem, so.
And if I can say, what we've seen from the renters, let's call them renters that are coming through, they're in a short-term basis, we don't see many of them at these 3 days or 2 days, which we're trying to discourage. I can understand that. We're seeing a lot of medical people who are coming here, relocating here for short-term, 90 days, being paid bonuses and very good wages to come here from other places.
Yeah.
And we're seeing them from all over. 90 days is pretty much the terms we're getting.
How many units are in your, well, we'll start with this. How many units are in the building that this property's in?
In my particular building, there's 6 units.
So there are 6.
In the entire complex, there's 100, approximately 100.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I until council, I mean, this is a close call, but until council changes some things, I have difficulty denying, you know, this where there's 3 out of 100 units, 4 out of 100, something like that. But it is a close call, I admit that, so. Any questions or comments from the board?
I think one of the favorable conditions is the location of where it's at. There didn't seem to be any saturation in that part of the city.
Yeah.
But my concern remains, and that's that, you know, there's 3 that he knows of. I mean, he's saying there's other people that, you know, have these, whether they have a permit or not. And, I mean, you're turning into a hotel. I mean, so, I mean, that's my concern.
Yeah, the number of units in the entire complex, I think, helps them though, because, you know, 3 or 4 out of 100.
That we
As
know
long as
of.
I know, yeah, as long as we know of the number and we can keep control of the number, I don't mind it that much, but I would like more information on that, but we kind of work with what we have. And then, just I guess to get on the record, these maps that we use, are these permits or special exceptions? If anyone from the city side knows. Because if it's permits, it would include the folks that got grandfathered in. Okay, so this will be all of them then.
The ones that have permits anyway.
Yeah, I think they get caught pretty quickly if they're unpermitted. Mr. Rivet knows something, yeah, but, you know, and again, until city council changes something, this one doesn't totally offend me, so I could see a shorter period of time, maybe a year, but I could get on board with it. Any other questions, comments, or a motion?
Two years, 3 years?
I was thinking 1 year, just
Okay.
since there's so many in that complex.
Then I'll move approval, and we'll see you in a year for a 1 year, and then advertise the self-imposed conditions that was in the application. Move approval, 1 year.
Approval for 1 year.
Okay.
Okay, we've got a motion. Do we have a second? Motion and a second to approve the special exception in case 15036 for the reason that it meets the statutory conditions for a special exception for a period of 1 year. And then all these conditions that you put in the application, adults only, no pets, things like that, all these conditions, you need to advertise it with those conditions. So that's the other part of the motion. Does that make sense?
I'm sorry, I'm not hearing. I'm getting bits and pieces here, I'm sorry.
Okay. So- oh,
Yes,
You have to advertise how you submitted that,
okay.
and you submitted these.
Okay, so in other words, I need to,
Advertise how you submitted those.
and how do you go about advertising? Put it in the newspaper, is that?
Well, it's just whenever you post it somewhere, so let's say you post it on Airbnb or
It's
something.
Airbnb.
Yeah, so when you post it on Airbnb, you have to make sure to you have to put this stuff in there. So you have to put in there, adults only, you have to be quiet, you have to, you know, no parties, things like that. You have to put that in there. That's what,
Oh, I
That's what
think,
Mr.
I think we do have something that, there are some rules we adhere to, like no cats, no smoking.
yeah, yeah.
That
That's
sort
all.
of thing now.
Whatever's in here, the board liked that, so keep doing that. That's at the end of the day, yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so we got a motion and a second to approve that special exception for 1 year, including the self-imposed conditions. Once you're able to, cast your votes. And it's approved.
So it's approved for one, for 1 year.
Yes.
And then at the end of 1 year, we come back and the same process?
The same process, and the board can determine how many years to do at that point. Maybe they'll do another year, maybe they'll do longer.
Okay.
Maybe it'll get denied, who knows? But you come back in 1 year and we reassess.
Okay.
Okay,
Thank
thank
you
you.
very much. Appreciate it.
Item 9 is 15022. It's a special exception to allow home sharing in the R2 district at 324 Northwest 26th Street.
Good afternoon, Board. My name is Joseph Buendia. I am the husband of the applicant, Gina Buendia, who's my wife. Thank you for hearing us today. I'd like to present the home on 324 Northwest 26th Street. It's a personal home that we bought last spring, summer, and it's a 3-bedroom, 2-bath house. It's got a long driveway that can accommodate 3 cars, and it's kind of a place that we bought for ourselves to use, and we've stayed there several times with our family. We've had some personal friends come into town to stay at the home, and we'd like to use this as a short-term rental in addition to personal use. We plan to have this as limited to 6 guests at a maximum, and no parking on the street, but only in the driveway with specific quiet hours for the neighborhood, which would be from 10 p.m. to 7 a.m.
And I'll give you the opportunity to address, but it looked like HP recommended denying the application, so if you wanted
Right.
to address that.
So at the historic preservation meeting, you know, there's a specific ordinance for the city that if you're in a historic preservation neighborhood, that the ordinance is that you have to live in the house. My understanding, after talking with Cindy and, you know, before we actually decided to do this, is that we live in a historic landmark, but not historic preservation. And so when we were in the meeting and the board met with us and we presented our house, their understanding is that we were in a HP district, but I don't believe that's the case. And so, but after the fact, I don't, you know, the meeting was already over at that point. So, so even though we don't live in the house personally, we live 6 miles away. My wife is the one that would be the one to manage the property and be around to make sure that everything's okay there. So that's my response to what happened at that meeting. So if
Well, I'll give you my understanding of where we are.
Sure.
And City Council passed a very interesting home sharing ordinance. And so what that means for our purposes at the Board of Adjustment is if you live in HP, well, first of all, if the owner occupies the home that's being offered for home sharing, you don't even need a special exception. You don't need to come here at all, right? So that's kind of the baseline, number one. If you live in anywhere else in the city and you want to offer it for home sharing, that you don't live there, then you need a special exception. If you live in HP, you need a special exception, one, but you also need to live on the property in the residence, or you need to come get a variance from us to get around that provision of the home sharing ordinance. And so that's my understanding of HP properties, is if you want to do home sharing, you can do that with a special exception, but if you don't want to live there, then you also need a variance. So it's kind of unique in HP.
Okay.
You're not an HP, right?
Correct.
But my understanding is, even though you're not an HP, you still have to go through HP and get a recommendation because it is a historic home and it's got a historic overlay here. And so you have to go there and get a recommendation from HP. And the recommendation is not binding on us, but you still need a recommendation from HP. And there was apparently some confusion at HP as to, I don't know, the nature of the code and whether you needed to live off-site or on-site or something. My takeaway from HP is, regardless of any confusion, their conclusion was they wanted one of the owners to be on-site. And so their conclusion was, if an owner's not going to be on site during home sharing, we don't want this to be used for home sharing. That's my takeaway from what happened at HP. So a couple of things, well, first of all, does that sort of make sense to you? Do you have any commentary on that? Or?
Well, no, I completely understand. And
Okay.
I think that the specific ordinance says that in HP districts, you have to live in the home. And
You can get a variance
there-
from that.
And
We do
so
it
I
all.
guess the assumption is that when everybody was presenting all the different cases, that the assumption was we were an HP district, but we're not. So, but after the fact, you know, and the reason after everybody, we all talked about it, their number one reason for them not making the recommendation is that we didn't live in the home per following the guidelines of the ordinance for that specific reason. So that's the part that's a little bit difficult for us, just because we're never looking to be in an HP neighborhood, and so anyway, it's for what we would like to do and for what our plans are, it greatly affects us for this project.
Sure. Sort of my takeaway to the board is, one, there was some confusion, I guess, maybe at HP, but at the end of the day, if they don't want to stay on the property, strip away the HP, the historic landmark, just strip away all that stuff. Any house in Oklahoma City that wants home sharing and they don't want to be on site still needs to get a special exception. And so this application went through HP, and HP basically said, we don't want this to be home sharing if they're not going to live on site. So that's my takeaway. One thing we could do is send it back to HP for more clarity and make sure that they understand whether, what rules apply, what code provisions apply before they give us a recommendation. Because if they're under the assumption, for whatever reason, that this was HP, I think that impacts the legitimacy of their recommendation to us and whether they've fully thought through all of the code provisions that were applicable to this application. If they were applying the wrong ones or whatever, or there was uncertainty, I think maybe the city needs to draft a memo or something to them and tell them what code provisions apply, what the requirements are, and then they deliberate and come to a recommendation, and then we analyze it whenever they've analyzed it under the appropriate code provisions. That's one option we can do. We can also the recommendation is just a recommendation, so we can review it on its merits, de novo basically, and see what we think about this application. I'm a little less comfortable with that because I understand there were some protests at HP from the neighbors, and those folks aren't here, maybe under the assumption that their voices were being heard by the denial recommendation from HP. So maybe they didn't think they needed to show up here or whatever. I also haven't had the time to review the proceedings at HP, so I don't know all the different views that were expressed or anything like that. So that's kind of where we are. That's what I understand, but I welcome any other comments from the board.
Okay, so it's not HP, but HP wants to regulate it anyways? It sounds very HP.
Apparently, the code says that if it's in HP, they have to go through the special exception and the variance and all that. This is not an HP, this is a historic landmark,
Yes.
but it still has to go through HP for a recommendation, because anything that's considered
Okay,
historic
so
at all has to
it's
go through HP.
Per house, per property, historic landmark.
Right.
Okay.
And they
Not the whole
did,
neighborhood.
yeah, they did review it, and there were some people present who don't live in this neighborhood necessarily, but they were speaking from an HP perspective and voiced their concerns.
Yeah.
So,
I lived in Edgemere once.
What's that?
I got robbed twice. I lived in Edgemere once.
oh,
Yeah.
I mean, I completely understand the ordinance, and we really want to follow the letter of the law. And when we have looked for this specific property, it was to try and stay away from an HP district, just because we know it's pretty strict, and we want to preserve that for those neighborhoods. So Unfortunately, you know, we are HL, and it was never brought up to the board, and so we're kind of where we're at right now. So,
Did y'all do the renovations of the house, or were they already done?
so we did some of the kind of curb appeal type stuff, and a lot of the inside of the home was designed by us and my wife. So the house itself had burned down, and the previous owners had remodeled it, and then we purchased it after that.
That explains it.
And some of the protests do seem like they're from the neighbors. I don't know who showed up at the meeting. The protests are definitely folks on
And
26th
I'm happy
Street.
to respond on the protest as well.
Yeah.
When we purchased the property, my wife actually sat down with both neighbors over an hour and a half, talked about what our plans were. We live in the city, where we're from. Actually, you know, a couple of the neighbors that we talked to said, you know, it's a great idea because we have family that comes into town and they can't fit in our house, and you know, we'd love for them to stay at your home and they can visit us. And it was all very cordial and very open, and even communicated, exchanged phone numbers. So after the fact, they sent the protest in, and was a little bit of a surprise to us, but we never had any ill will towards any of them, and we've always had a good relationship, speaking with them previous to that.
When they refer to 324, I mean, that's the number for this property. Is this already having been used as
It's
for an
not,
Airbnb?
no. We actually had some personal friends that stayed at the home, and then we've had some extended family kind of had some family that was sick and they had to come in town, and we've had some people stay, but it's not a listing. It's not being placed on any type of a home sharing at this point.
And it's the historical landmark. The whole thing burned down?
It did burn down. I don't know what year that happened.
All of it? Is it still?
Yeah. But I will say that, you know, the neighbor, one of the neighbors that sent the protest is actually a renter, is a long-term renter of a home, not actually the homeowner. And you know, personally, we live on a street close to Sparrow Park, and we absolutely have taken care of our yard the best out of all of the neighbors, and so we feel like in one way we're trying to increase the value of the neighborhood, and not change the atmosphere of the neighborhood whatsoever, but just from a personal standpoint.
I don't know where the board is on this one, but I am not currently comfortable voting for approval. I can be outvoted, I've been outvoted before, but I'm not currently there yet. And it has not very much to do with the merits of the application, it's just sort of a lack of information on my part and some confusion at HP that makes me not quite there to support and approve the application, particularly in this area. And so with more information, I could potentially get there, but I'm not there yet. I would want any confusion that HP has resolved before they give us a recommendation first, and then I want to review their proceedings before I get comfortable voting for approval, and definitely want to hear the protests and weigh the protests against any approval that I would have. And so, you know, without having done all that, from my perspective, it's a lack of information. It's not on the merits of the application at all. I know you guys have been in front of us before. You do a great job. You seem like responsible owners. So it's not on the merits of the application. It's just a lack of information and clarity from my perspective. But I'm only one board member. So other questions or comments?
I mean, I can appreciate that perspective, but I think you know, from my perspective, the recommendation is a recommendation. And if it was an informed recommendation, as far as like if they knew exactly what statutes they were supposed to be following and which ordinances applied and whatnot, I mean, they don't want a home sharing in this place. And so to me, I mean, the recommendation from HP carries some weight for me. The protest, I mean, we have two well-written protests in front of us as it is. I know they're not here to speak. But I mean, I think I can give some weight to those and to those concerns as well. But I mean, and this is just so you kind of know where the board can see where I'm sitting is, I mean, this again is in a highly saturated area. These particular owners have another home in the area. I mean, we're, you know, part of what we're trying to guard against is changing the whole character of these neighborhoods. And whether you have a lot of money to spend on a really nice Airbnb and make it the best yard in the neighborhood, it's still not a home that people are occupying. I mean, it's strangers coming in and out. And I think that, to me, continues to be a concern about changing the core of what these neighborhoods were designed to be. And I don't think that that was the intent of the city when we allowed for home sharing. And so those are just some thoughts that I have. I can't appreciate your
Sure. I mean,
position.
it sounds to me like we currently have at least two that would not currently support the application. One of those perspectives, which is mine, is I'm not ruling out support for the application. I just would want more clarity from HP, and then I might or might not support the application. That's kind of where it sounds like we are now. Other comments?
Do we have the authority to send it back to HP? Oh, okay.
You could send it back and say that you'd like more clarification of their opinion. I mean, I could tell you from my notes, but I think you need something official from HP that says this is what the body decided. And then with that written document, you can give weight to it as you determined appropriate and make your decision based on that.
I guess I should add for the record, I've got an email from Katie Friddle here that we can add to the record, which is sort of what's going on in my head. And it says, I'll just read the whole thing. The commission's recommendation was to deny the application with the specific findings that, although the commission supports home sharing and there is a path to home sharing, this particular case does not meet those guidelines because the owner is not living on site and the conditions cannot be met due to the neighborhood sentiment. And then it says, there was confusion among commission members about the requirement for a home share to be the operator's primary residence and for the operator to be on site at the time of the rental. This applies to HP, but not HL. But Katie wasn't at the meeting, so she didn't convey that to the commissioners at the meeting. And so my concern is if they're analyzing this as if it's HP, they're analyzing it under the wrong standard. And so the recommendation might change, it might not change. It sounds like it probably won't because of this neighborhood sentiment point.
They'll say no.
But, right, but I still think they need to analyze it under the appropriate code provision. And if there's any confusion, if I were on HP, I would probably want a memo from the city clarifying what the proper analysis is.
The code does specify, historic preservation neighborhood. It doesn't say,
Right.
Historic landmarks. And
The other
that
point, and the other point is, and this is more purposes of appeal from this board, is procedurally whether it even has to go through HP. I mean, if it's not HP, I would want clarity on why this would even have to go through HP and clarity on HL properties like theirs still being required to go through HP to get some recommendation. And then what does that recommendation need to say, and what does HP need to analyze that case under? And if the conclusion of that is it's probably not, but if it's that they don't even need to go through HP, if I were them, I would appeal to district court and say, I shouldn't have even had to go through HP. They denied my application, but I shouldn't have even had to go there. So I just want some clarity on that before I get comfortable one way or the other on the application.
The ordinance is in your packet. Chapter 59, section 59.9350.38.1.
Yeah.
Section E. A special exception must be obtained for home sharing where the property is not the primary residence of the host.
Right. But this isn't saying why it has to go through HP. That's just saying if they want to do what they want to do, they need a special exception from us. But I need clarity on why they have to go to HP in the first place. And
That would be in that general historic preservation guidelines document, and you're correct. You should have all of that
Right,
before you, so that you can make a decision based on all of it, the guidelines, the ordinance, and the comments, all in one document, so that you weigh all of that at one time.
And what it sounds like to me is if it has to go through HP, HP analyzes it under the normal home sharing special exception because it's an off-site owner. And then they give a recommendation that we want to do it or we don't want to do it. We want the owner to be on site if they're going to do home sharing, that kind of stuff. That sounds like what they want to say is we want the owner on site.
And they did say things like that. I am not the record, so sharing my notes won't be helpful
Right,
to you,
right. But if that's the case,
they
they don't
did
need a
comment.
special exception. If they're going to be on site, they don't need and they're not an HP, they don't need a special exception. So we don't need to hear it at all, unless they want to get around that, right? But that's kind of where I stand. Cindy, did you have something for us to review? Okay. Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah, this is just a general.
How often does HP meet? Once a month?
Once a month.
If they can?
It's the
Meet
first
one.
Wednesday of every month, so, of course, they just met yesterday, so it would be an entirely new month.
Yeah, and this is Code Provision 7250.3, General Provisions, Historic Preservation Commission Review. All matters regarding property or sites situated within Historic Preservation District or Historic Landmark Overlay District shall be reviewed and considered by Historic Preservation Commission prior to final action by Planning, Traffic, Board of Adjustment, or City Council. So if that applies, and it seems like it would apply to home sharing, then it would have to go through HP, and then they have to give a recommendation. So the last piece then is whether they're analyzing it under the right standards, if they're analyzing it under HP standards or not. But again,
Do you guys have any intent to move there if,
I mean, we may. I mean, we're going to be in Oklahoma City forever. We love the city and we love that area. So, you know, we intend on keeping the property. It's just, you know, what we're allowed to do with the property. And, you know, we travel a lot and we enjoy staying in places like this. And so that's, you know,
we meet
one of the
next.
reasons we've done it.
Do we meet in 2 weeks? I think we do. Yeah, we do meet in 2 weeks. Okay. The other option would be, this might be a little bit faster than going back to HP, is we could continue it to the next meeting, and that would give at least me time to do a little more research, see what happened at HP, see if I think their analysis sort of satisfies enough to give a recommendation to us, and then review it. That would be a little faster. We could try that. I don't know if you have an opinion on that, but.
Well, no, I mean, I'm happy to do whatever you guys are comfortable with. I appreciate you guys being extremely thorough with it. I will say that the lady that lived on 20th Street that spoke yesterday specifically spoke to the fact that she understands the ordinance of it being historic preservation, and spoke to the fact that the ordinance says that if you don't live on site, you can't do home sharing in an HP district. And to me, that means that she assumed we were not HL, but HP, and if the ordinance is different, you know, we totally understand, but, you know, we're not HP. So I feel like the protest and her speaking on behalf of her side of it and speaking to the group, and the group also agreeing that you have to live on site, that was really the number one thing that we went away with yesterday, is that we don't live on site and we can't do home sharing there because it's because of being at HP. And so that part for me was going back and looking and talking with Cindy. It's and the reason we moved there was not to be an historic preservation neighborhood. So it.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's the whole point of the special exception is you're not going to live on site, and so you know, if there was an understanding, I guess, among whoever you said spoke, the protester, I don't think the commission thinks that you have to live on site. Like, it's prohibited to have Airbnbs if you don't live on site. They certainly know better than that.
They might.
Because that's the whole point of the ordinance, is that if you're not living on site, you need a special exception. So, but if that's what they thought, I think they're just wrong. What I think they probably thought is they don't want this to be home sharing unless you do live on site. And so they're not going to give a recommendation to approve something like that. That's what I think they probably concluded. But I would just want to review that. I am perfectly fine saying that HP got it wrong if they got it wrong. I would just want to review their comments and the protests in particular, and just get an idea of what those are, since no one's here and it is in a very kind of controversial, I don't know if controversial is the right word, but
It's not Heritage Hills.
it's a somewhat disputed
Not Heritage
kind of area, yeah. So
I mean, and that was what they were gonna allow, people to live in their apartment houses on top of their garages.
yeah.
So,
And I will say, I mean, as the municipal councilor pointed out, I mean, sometimes we get, especially in the more historic areas, we get people coming out of the woodworks that might not even live in the neighborhood, but just don't really like home sharing in historic areas in general. And so we take that into account as well. But
Appreciate that.
that's kind of where I am, as a continuance to our next meeting, just to dig into this a little bit further. Frankly, I don't think, even if these board members were inclined to approve, I don't think you have enough support anyway. So the best
no.
option would be
split.
to get a continuance. We be available on the 19th, our next meeting?
Is that May the 19th?
Yeah.
We can make it work.
Okay. Well, board members, do we have a motion to continue?
I appreciate the email from Katie and reading that in. That helps me.
Okay.
I still don't want to vote yes or no today, so
Yeah.
I will move we continue this to May 19th.
Be curious to see if Monica would second that one, but we've got a motion and a second to continue this
And she's boycotting.
to the May 19th, 2022 meeting. Cast your votes. And the item's continued. So we'll see you on the 19th.
Thank you guys so much.
Thank
Really
you.
appreciate it.
Thank you.
Mike, did you get that email too from Katie? Oh, okay.
It was printed
Before,
out
oh, is it printed?
before the meeting, yeah. Okay, that concludes the items on requiring a separate vote. Additional items, nothing on the agenda. Communications and board reports, nothing on the agenda. Citizens be heard. Seeing no one. Other business. Do we have any other business, board members or staff? Okay, we are adjourned.